Good morning, 6th grade. This is your reading video for Friday, March 27th. And we are going to be getting back into the book. You should have written your retell summary yesterday, which means that we're getting on to the second quadrant of the book, and we're going to be looking at some author's craft things today. So if you don't have your Esperanza book and your reader's notebook, go ahead and pause the video and grab that now. Okay, now that you have this, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we've been learning that good readers synthesize their understanding of the beginning of a book by writing a retell summary, and I hope you're doing that not only with your Esperanza book, but also with all the books that you're reading at home, because I'm sure that's how you're spending all of your free time right now, is by reading books. That would make my teacher heart very happy. By the way, you're not in my living room. If you can tell, I took a little trip to the classroom and it feels very empty without you, but I am enjoying the whiteboard. Today, I'm going to teach you that good readers think about author's craft as they read. Now remember, author's craft is simply a tool and techniques, or tools and techniques that an author uses to draw readers into the text and to communicate his or her message or the line of thinking. And today we're going to be looking at examples of something called situational irony. That's probably a new word for you guys, but situational irony occurs when an event in a story directly contradicts a character's expectations. So something happens that the character didn't think in a million years was going to happen. So I'm going to write that word on the board, and I want you to write it in your notebooks. Situational irony. Okay, go ahead and write that down. Now, watch me as I model thinking about an event in the story that contradicts Esperanza's expectations of how she thought her life was going to be. Today we'll be using the stems when the book said. I thought this was ironic because, and this helps me understand something about the book. So you should have situational irony at the top of your page, and below this title we're going to draw a T chart. And on the left side of the T chart, like that, I'm going to have you write now. And then on the other side, I'm going to have you write then. And as we compare Esperanza's life, what Esperanza's life was like before her father's death to what her life was like after her death, you're going to copy down the information into your own reader's notebooks at home. So we're going to begin on page 65, where it says, Esperanza stood at the station at Zacatecas. Still hard for me to say. Okay, 65, under the squiggle. Esperanza stood at the station at Zacatecas, tugging at the second-hand dress. It didn't fit properly, and it was the most awful yellow. And even though they had been out of the wagon for some hours, she still smelled like guavas. It had taken them 2 days to arrive in Zacatecas, but finally, that morning, they left the wagon hidden in the thicket of shrubs in the trees and walked into town. After the discomfort as the wagon, she was looking forward to the train. And we're going to actually stop right there for our first example, and I'm going to show you how I'd fill out this T chart, okay? So when the book said that Esperanza wore a second-hand dress, I was thinking this was ironic, because in the beginning of the book, Esperanza wore silk dresses. She talked about that beautiful blue silk dress. She wore ribbons in her hair, and this helps me understand that Esperanza is no longer wealthy. Her life is very different. So we would go ahead and write, now she's wearing secondhand clothes. Remember, they're from the poor box. And then Esperanza wore silk dresses. ahead and pause if you need to finish writing that down, and we're going to keep reading on page 66. Where it says the locomotive arrived. The locomotive arrived, pulling a line of cars and hissing and spewing steam. But they did not board the fancy car with the compartments and leather seats or the dining car with the white linens. Instead, Alfonso led them to a car with rows of wooden benches like church pews facing each other, already crowded with peasants. Trash littered the floor, and it was reeking of rotting fruit and urine. A man with a small goat on his lap grinned at Esperanza, revealing no teeth. 3 barefoot children, 2 boys and a girl, crowded near their mother. Their legs were chalky with dust, their clothes were in tatters, and their hair was grimy. An old, frail beggar woman pushed by them to the back of the car, clutching a picture of Our Lady Guadalupe. Her hand was outstretched for alms, like coins. She's a beggar. Esperanza had never seen so close, or never been so close to so many peasants before. When she went to school, all of her friends were like her. When she went into town, she was escorted and hurried around any beggars. And the peasants always kept their distance. It was simply the way it was. She couldn't help but wonder if they would steal her things. "Mama," said Esperanza, stopping at the doorway, "we cannot travel in this car. It is not clean, and these people do not look trustworthy." Esperanza saw Miguel frown as he edged around her to sit down. "Mija, it is all we can afford," said Mama. "We must make do. It is not easy for me either, but remember, we are going to a place that will be better than living with Tio Luis, and at least we can be together." Okay, I want you to pause the video, after I give you some directions, and I want you to write down something that is different now than it was before Papa died. Okay, press pause. Okay, welcome back. I wish I could hear your suggestions of things that were different now than before Papa died, but something that I thought of was that Esperanza is now riding in the train car that is crowded with peasants. And before, she rode in that really fancy train car with the white tablecloths, and it's very different than what she expected to ride on the train. So when the book said and talked about her new experience on the train, I thought it was ironic because it was different. So now she rides in a dirty train full of peasants. I don't know how to spell that. Peasants. Peasants are like lower class people. And before, she rode in a fancy car. She rode with people like her in that fancy car, meaning people of the upper class. Okay, pause if you need to finish writing that down. Then we're going to pick up on page 67. Okay, where it says the train pulled out. The train pulled out and settled into a steady motion. Hortensia and Mama took out their crocheting. Mama was using a small hook and white cotton thread to make carpetas, lace doilies to put under a lamp or vase. She held up her work to Esperanza and smiled. "Would you like to learn?" Esperanza shook her head. Why did Mama bother crocheting lace? They had no vases or lamparas to put on top of them. Esperanza leaned her head against the window. She knew she did not belong here. She was Esperanza Ortega from El Rancho de las Rosas. She crossed her arms tight and stared out the window. For hours, Esperanza watched the undulating land pass in front of her. Everything seemed to remind her of what she'd left behind. The nopales reminded her of Abuelita, who loved to eat the prickly pear cactus sliced and soaked in vinegar and oil. The dogs from the small villages barked and ran after the train and reminded her of Marisol, whose dogs Capitan chased after trains in the same way. And every time Esperanza saw a white shrine decorated with crosses, flowers, and miniature statues of saints next to the rail, she couldn't help but wonder if it had been someone's father who had died on the tracks and if somewhere there was another girl who missed him too. Esperanza opened her I should look up how to read that word, to check on the doll. Lifting it out and straightening her clothes, the barefoot peasant girl ran over. "Mona," she said, and reached up to touch the doll. Esperanza quickly jerked it away and put it back into the bag, covering it with old clothes. "Mona, Mona," said the girl, running back to her mother, and then she began to cry. Mama and Hortensia both stopped their needles and stared at Esperanza. Mama looked across at the girl's mother. "I am sorry for my daughter's bad manners." Esperanza looked at Mama in surprise. Why was she apologizing to these people? She and Mama shouldn't even be sitting in this car. Hortensia looked from one to the other and excused herself. "I think I'll find Alfonso and Miguel and see if they bought tortillas at the station." Mama looked at Esperanza, top of page 70. "I don't think it would have hurt you to let her hold it for a few moments." "Mama, she is poor and dirty," said Esperanza. But Mama interrupted. "When you scorn these people, you scorn Miguel, Hortensia, and Alfonso, and you embarrass me and yourself. As difficult as it is to accept, our lives are different now." The child kept crying. Her face was so dirty that her tears washed clean streaks down her cheeks. Esperanza suddenly felt ashamed and the color rose in her face, but she still pushed the bag further under the seat with her feet and turned her body away from Mama. Esperanza tried not to look back at the little girl, but she couldn't help it. She wished she could tell the little girl's mother that she had always given her old toys to the orphanage, but that this doll was special. Besides, the child would have soiled it with her hands. Mama reached into her bag and pulled out a ball of yarn. "Esperanza, hold out your hands for me." She raised her eyebrows and nodded toward the girl. Esperanza knew exactly what Mama intended to do. They had done it many times before. On page 71. Mama wrapped the yarn around Esperanza's outstretched hands about 50 times until they were almost covered. Then she slipped a string of yarn through the middle of the loops and tied a knot tight before Esperanza removed her hands. A few inches below the knot, Mama tied another snug knot around the yarn, forming the head, and then she cut the bottom loops, separated the strands into sections, and braided each section into what looked like arms and legs. She held the yarn doll up, offering it to the little girl. She ran to Mama, smiling, took the doll, and ran back to her own mother's side. The mother whispered into the girl's ear. Shyly, she said, "Gracias, thank you." "De nada, you're welcome," said Mama. The women and the children got off the train at the next stop. Esperanza watched the little girl stop in front of their window, wave to Mama, and smile again. Before she walked away, she made the yarn doll wave too. Esperanza was glad the girl got off the train and took the silly yarn doll with her. Otherwise, she would have been reminded of her own selfishness and Mama's disapproval for miles to come. Okay, we're going to stop there for a second. I want you to think a little bit. Are your opinions of Esperanza changing? Also, I want you to write in your reader's notebook another example of situational irony. Okay, how things are now compared to how they were then, and how are they different. So pause the video and go ahead and write another example of situational irony in your notebook. Okay, welcome back. Something that I thought of when I was reading this that was very different now than was before is that Esperanza only has one fancy thing left, and that is her doll. But before, Esperanza had so many fancy things. The book said that she had a doll for every single birthday, that she'd have a beautiful porcelain doll, and she had everything she could ever want. So it's very different than she expected her life to be, to only have one fancy thing. So I'm going to use the word luxury. It just means fancy thing. And I'm going to write, I'll erase so you can see a little better. Esperanza's only, here's that word, luxury is her doll. And then before Papa died, Esperanza's life was full of luxury. Okay, pause if you need time to finish writing that down. Okay, welcome back. Good readers show empathy for characters. Now remember, empathy is putting yourself in the position of another character, and when you empathize with a character, like I said, you take on the feelings of that character. So when you empathize with characters, it helps you feel most like you are in the story. So what character do you empathize with the most? Is it Hortensia? Is it Miguel? Is it Mama? Is it Esperanza? Go ahead and write down which character you're empathizing with the most and why in your notebook. And then today and every day when you're reading, maybe you're reading today with your siblings or reading tonight before you go to bed, I want you to think about author's craft. What methods, maybe it's irony, maybe it's something else, does an author use to show you the meaning of the book? Okay, enjoy your weekend, scholars. This is your last reading lesson of this week. I will post another one on Monday. See you later.